Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free, and that's thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting the Tough Girl podcast and helping me to increase the amount of female role models in the media, please do go and visit patreon.com, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. All patrons will get their name on a dedicated patrons page on the Tough Girl website. All female patrons $5 and above are invited to join the closed Facebook group, the Tough Girl Tribe. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking with Ursula Martin, who survived ovarian cancer, walked 3,700 miles in Wales, wrote a book about it, and is now walking 5,000 miles across Europe.
My name's Ursula and I'm 40 and I've pretty much spent the last 10 years travelling in various forms. I don't think I'd call myself an adventurer, but I have found myself having adventures which have kind of gradually increased in size and scope. Yeah.
Could you tell us more about your early years? Where did you grow up? Did you come from like an outdoorsy family? Were you adventurous when you were younger?
I grew up in Derbyshire. I was born in Wales, grew up in Derbyshire and moved back to Wales when I was 19. I mean, fundamentally, I was not sporty. One little bit. I remember my mum used to go, we'd go on kind of healthy holidays to the Lake District and my mum would make us go on walks. So I've got 3 brothers and sisters, so there were 4 siblings, and I remember my brother showed me this technique of picking up a stone and carrying it for a while, so that when you put down the stone, it felt so much easier, because we would all just kind of walk along moaning and hating it, and kind of being driven by my mum for this healthy walk. And as far as team sports go, I was awful. I was last picked. I was really bad. But there are a couple of things which kind of also do stand out, which I can see that I did have the potential to do what I'm doing now. And it's just that perhaps I didn't find my way to see who I was back then. And one of them, I've been having this particular memory, was, do you remember the bleep test?
Yeah.
In school. And we only ever did it once. And I would have been in kind of year 7 or year 8, and I was not seen as capable sport-wise whatsoever. And we did this bleep test, and everyone's running up and down, the gym. And suddenly I found myself carrying on when other people were dropping out, and other people that, were more athletic than me. And I carried on, and I was carrying on running, and suddenly there were only 2 of us left. It was me and this girl called Rachel, and she was the super duper, on all the teams, really popular, whatever. And I, this absolute kind of class nerd type thing, was in this final 2 with this girl, and we just kept going and going, and everyone started cheering me on. And we went on for ages, and then I didn't make the last one, so I collapsed. I remember collapsing against the wall and everyone coming over. Oh my God, you're okay. And then the girl, Rachel, she ran one more and then she stopped. So it had obviously been this kind of little competition. And when I think about that, when I think about what I have now, which is great stamina, I can see that was there back then, but I had no knowledge, or I never used those capabilities in school. So yeah, it's interesting.
You said that you spent sort of the past 10 years traveling. What sort of happened in your 30s? Was there any big changes in your life?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, the thing that I don't tend to talk about very much is that I didn't actually have a very happy childhood. So I was pretty kind of traumatized by my childhood and teenage experiences, and I didn't really know who I was when I was in my 20s. So what happened was when I was about 29, I was working in homeless hostels at the time, and I started to do a counselling course as a way to, further progress in my career. Not that it was. I've always kind of worked minimum wage jobs, really, so I wouldn't really call myself as having a career. But so I was kind of looking to, move on, maybe take up counselling, and that requires you obviously to look at yourself a little bit, which is not really something that I was used to at that time. And I realised that I was doing counselling, I was taking up counselling as an escape, not as a true progression. And I realised that I needed to travel a bit, perhaps. So in that year, 2009, at the age of 29, I did that classic thing of getting rid of all your stuff and packing it all up and, setting off to the great unknown. And I stayed mostly in Europe at that time. My idea was to go east. I wanted to go and explore kind of Bulgaria, Romania. I'd been to Spain before, but I hadn't really been further east. And so I went to Spain. My sister lived there. I went to see her for a couple of months, and I ended up staying for about 10 months and, doing a couple of walks there and sleeping on beaches and hanging out with hippies and, getting food out of skips at the back of the supermarket and all those kind of things and having a really great time. And then I heard about this trip down the Danube. It's this kayaking trip. And someone told me, it's this bunch of hippies and they just float down the river and you sleep wherever you like. And I thought, that sounds interesting. I'd never kayaked before in my life. So I went and had an hour's practice and then ended up kayaking the length of the Danube. The second or I think the third, let's say the third time I ever got into a kayak, I was in Germany setting off to paddle 2,500 kilometers. And so what happened, let's cut this. I'm sure I can expand on other points later, but basically what happened then, I was 31, kayaking down the Danube, and I was planning to spend the winter in Bulgaria and then travel by walking, again in this kind of disorganized, let's just see what happens kind of way. Not in this, what's happened to my life now is I have this kind of grand adventure sense where I pick a huge project and then I work towards it. And at that point, 8 years ago, I was very much not doing that. I was just kind of, I think I'll do this maybe, and then just seeing what happens. So unfortunately, my plans didn't turn out like that, and I ended up being diagnosed with ovarian cancer, which was a big shock. Basically hitchhiked home from Bulgaria for Christmas, which would have been Christmas 2011, and didn't go back to Bulgaria for quite some time because I ended up going to hospital in the UK, going to doctors, going to hospital, and going through an ovarian cancer diagnosis. Yeah, so that changed everything. And I don't think I would still be traveling 10 years later. Well, who knows? Who knows what I would have ended up doing? But obviously, that is a pretty big change of life, change of outlook, change of immediate future at the time. And yeah, everything since then has just flowed from there.
How did you get through that time of the initial diagnosis, going through the treatment? Did you have support in place? How did you cope?
It was very tough. In one sense, I'm going to say that I didn't suffer as much as many or most people who experience a cancer. I had stage 1A. So I basically had a removable tumour. I lost an ovary and some other bits, but I still have a womb and a part of one ovary. I didn't have to have chemo. So in that sense, could have been a lot worse. But in another sense, I was staying on a friend's sofa when I first went to the doctor. And so I had this huge psychological blow of basically being intensely vulnerable and having no support and no shelter. So it was really tough. And I don't think I am a positive cancer inspiration because I was a miserable bugger during my cancer. And the only thing I can say is that I got through it. And that's it.
Yeah. Where did wanting to walk around Wales come from?
So that was me. Basically, so I go into follow-up treatment. You know how the thing is with these cancer diagnoses is you have to have checkups post treatment. They say, right, there's no cancer in your body right now, so come back to hospital in 3 months and we'll check. And literally the only thing I had in my future, so everything had been completely cut in half. I was in Bulgaria, I was going to walk. Oh, no, now you're in Wales and you can't you can't do anything. And the only thing that I had in my future was this sequence of hospital appointments. And it was like a net that was both security and capture, I would say. So I ended up, going to Wales, getting a place to live, going on to, finding a way to survive in this situation. And I got the idea that I could walk to hospital, and it's because of the rivers. So I was just behind my house, about 6 miles away, was the source of the River Severn, I realised, and I had to walk. I had to travel to Bristol to go to hospital. And I just suddenly got this idea. I thought I could walk there. And so I did. And it was, in a way, it made me feel normal again, because it took all the skills that I'd been using over the past few years, all my traveling skills, my adventure skills, and it made me see that I was still myself in this new kind of cancer world, that I could still go and challenge myself, and that I was still capable. So I walked to hospital and I walked home again, back up the River Wye, and that was about 6 months after I finished my treatment. And then that followed on to a bigger walk where I thought, well, what if I walked to hospital but I didn't walk home? What if I walked up the Offa's Dyke path and around the coast of Wales? And I could do it as a fundraising and a piece of symptoms awareness, because at that time, this is back in 2012, at that time, the 5-year survival rate for women diagnosed with ovarian cancer was 35%. And part of that was due to a lack of knowledge of the symptoms in the general population. So this kind of became my cause. I wanted to, everybody suddenly feels inspired to do some fundraising or something when they get affected by something. And I just kind of created this journey, both for myself, but also as a piece of charity work. And it ended up being huge.
You ended up doing 3,700 miles, through and through and across Wales. How long were you out there? What was it like on a day-to-day while dealing with a cancer?
I had to work for about a year to get the money to see myself through it. I mean, in some ways, I think people interpret my book as if to say I was completely unprepared and I was this kind of naive fool who went off and did this. I don't entirely like that interpretation, because I think I am more prepared than I give myself credit for in terms of the long years of sleeping outside and the long years of the kind of psychology of dealing with uncertainty, in terms of kind of wild camping or traveling or hitchhiking, of just standing there and going, I cannot control this future. I accept whatever comes to me and I will deal with it. And I think in those terms, I'm extremely skillful and prepared. However, I was naive in many other ways. So I thought that I could do it in 8 months, and it ended up taking, I think, 15, and that's about 13 months of walking in that. I also suffered greatly from plantar fasciitis almost through the entire journey, and so there are ways of operating that I have now that I did not have back then. Just in terms of dealing with injury or assessing day-to-day capability a bit better. But it was a completely wonderful, euphoric, brilliant experience to do it. I ended up walking, as you said, I ended up walking 3,700 miles because I kept, when I was in the planning of the journey, I just kept adding bits in. That's what happened. I'd see like a river. I ended up walking 4 pairs of rivers, which was just wonderful, because I'd see where the mouth of one appeared on the coast, and I'd realised that I could walk up it to the source, and then always within a few miles, just a few miles, 2 different sides of a hill, there'd be another river, and I could walk all the way back down a different river back to the coast. And I got excited. I saw 2 mountain routes. I thought, I could walk the Cambrian way from Conway to Cardiff, and then I could walk, there's another mountain route, and I'd see that and I go, well, I can walk that back to Conway again, and adding it on, and then it just was huge.
You have written about your experiences. You've published a book, One Woman Walks Wales. Absolutely, incredible. How did the book come about? Was that something that you decided on? Was that something that other people asked you to do? Did a publisher reach out to you? What happened there?
I never thought that I could be a writer. I don't think, as I've said, I didn't have a great time when I was a kid. I ended up dropping out of school with GCSEs. I dropped out halfway through my A-levels, ended up taking my A-levels in night school when I was 25, 2 A-levels. Haven't been to university. So being a writer was not even on my wavelength of capabilities. This is, you might as well say, why don't you try and get a job as a fairy tale princess? This just wasn't, it was a dream. It was something that I never thought that I was truly capable of being, because I didn't really think much of myself and my capabilities. So I wasn't aiming for this, but what it felt natural to do, because the journey was about fundraising, was to write. If you want to fundraise, what do? You need to make people aware of what you're doing. So you get a Facebook page, you get a Twitter, you get blah blah blah. You keep a blog, and I'd never had Facebook before, so I signed up specifically for this walk. I got myself an account, made a public page, and I wrote about the journey. And people kept giving me good feedback about my writing, and they'd say, you should write a book. And I started to believe that I could write a book. And suddenly this idea of being a writer came closer to me. And when I finished, I was very unconfident about how to go about this. And I tried a Kickstarter. I tried self-publishing. And that didn't work because I'm terrible at self-promotion. I'm terrible at saying, look, I am brilliant and you should do this. So I was kind of writing into a black hole. I still had this idea that I would write a book, but I didn't have any agent. I didn't have any contacts. I didn't. It felt like I was writing into a black hole, which, when you struggle with self-confidence, is extremely difficult to do. And I wound up sending an email to a small Welsh publisher called Honno, Welsh Women's Press, and they said yes. So I kind of had this, 1-for-1 success rate. And that helped a lot to have the book contract. I remember thinking, because, writing a book is kind of this whole second endurance challenge in lots of ways. You have to sit down at the blank page over and over and over again, and you have to not give up, and you have to keep trying, and you have to take any small amount of progress as progress, and you have to not think of the big picture. You have to think really small and just keep taking small steps. So in the middle of that, that's really difficult. And I kept thinking to myself, if I don't write this book, this story of cancer and then walk is so complete, I kept thinking of it as a pearl in the palms of my hands. And I thought, if I don't write this story, then I will never write any story, because this one is so ready to be written that I cannot abandon it. And so I persevered.
Do you identify now as a writer?
I do, mostly. It's difficult for me to accept that about myself, but yes, I do, and I can't quite believe it, but here I am.
How do you think your confidence has changed after kayaking the length of the Danube, walking 3,700 miles around Wales, writing your book? How did that impact on your self-confidence? Do you feel confident now?
Not all the time. I am a work in progress, as we all are, but it has changed me massively, massively, because I now have these absolutes that nobody can take away from me. Nobody can say, nobody can tell me I'm not physically capable, because I walked 3,700 miles and I wrote a book. These are these kind of, even I cannot deny that to myself, because it's all this uncertain, a lack of self-confidence is this kind of uncertain, for me, it's about this uncertainty about myself. And I've always had this inability to define myself as well, to kind of see who I truly am. And so that leads to lots of insecurity about, maybe what you look like or how you come across to other people, or trying to see yourself in the eyes of others. And what I've done now, over the last 10 years, has given me this solidity. Because, like I say, that these things are absolutes and you can't undermine them. And that's a wonderful feeling.
Absolutely. So I'd love to know, where did the idea of walking Europe come from, walking across Europe?
In a way, it's going back to what cancer interrupted. So although at that time, like I said, I didn't have the idea of the grand journey, once I completed one grand journey in Wales, it kind of became easier to think of a follow-up. And there was this sense of like, because once the cancer hit, I was just, all I was doing was kind of responding to what was directly in front of me. Kind of, oh, you've had cancer, right? Do a walk around Wales. Oh, right, people, right, then write a book. And then I came out of this sequence of 3 events, and there was this sense of like, where was I? What was happening? And so, yeah, I knew that I wanted to go back to Bulgaria, and I was quite interested in Ukraine. And then, so I thought, well, yeah, just walk across Europe.
How did you turn that dream into reality? Like, did you end up setting like a start date? How long did you give yourself to plan or to prepare or to save the money up?
Um,
Or did you not?
no, I did. I had to. I think the thing that really helps me when planning is not to become overwhelmed by the entirety of the task that you've set yourself, but to just go, okay, well, if I was going to do this, what would I need? And you just keep it hypothetical, and you start imagining your way through all of the possibilities of the journey. And slowly you're able to prepare for it without ever getting overwhelmed by it. So I had the idea that I wanted to walk across Europe in the end stages of my existing walk. So that would be, let's call that spring 2015. And then I left Kiev, I stopped working, and I left for Ukraine in August 2018. So that's 3 years. Now, I had to write a book in that time. And I was working, so both writing a book and saving as much money as you can for an adventure. I couldn't do both of those things at the same time. But what I did was I didn't get a house when I went back to mid Wales in August 2015 was when I finished. So I know I didn't pay any rent for about 3 years. I lived in a van, and I did house sitting. So what that means is, first of all, you can work part-time and have free time to write your book. And then secondly, you can then work full-time or as much as you can and save a lot more money per month. So I think that's the core part of what has made this financially achievable for me. It has taken total focus. You know, I'm not a person who goes on like short-term holidays anyway. I don't really buy new clothes. I had a van. I spent £1,000 on a van and then lived in it. You know, I'm not a person who is focused on luxuries, you know, capitalist kind of short-term luxuries. And I think, I guess you could say I am pretty, if I want something, I am pretty determined to achieve it. And so to that end, I was able to save up enough money to leave on.
Did you know how long it would end up taking you? Did you plan for a certain length of time to be out there?
No. I'm terrible at planning for timings. Even now, I'm really bad. I tend to just kind of make something up. And then as soon as I've said it, it's kind of reality. And then I berate myself for not sticking to it. And what I really need to do is make better assessments in the first place. So I was talking to this girl one day, this kind of acquaintance. She said, "Oh, you'll be back in a couple of months, won't you?" And I was kind of like, "No, it's going to take much longer than that." So I kind of said, I'm going to be away for 2 years. Because my estimate at that time of this route is around 5,000 to 5,500 miles. But that is an estimate because I haven't picked a specific route. So even then, this is kind of step one in your planning, in your assessment judgments of how long is this going to take? Well, how far are you walking? And I don't even know that. So, I'm screwed as far as accurate planning is going. And that's how I like to work as well, because I just can't do kind of, I'll be here on day 1, I'll be here on day 18, I'll be here on day 360. I just can't do that. I can't work like that. I'm much looser, and I think that's what I've learned from the first journey. Because, what happened during that first journey was I said, I am going to walk. It's in the book. It's ridiculous. I was like, right, I've got X amount of distance. I've got X amount of time. Right, divide distance by time. Okay, 19 miles a day for 8 months. I was so unrealistic. And then I had to face the unpleasant reality of having extremely painful feet and getting slowly and slowly more behind my schedule. And I just had this absolute meltdown of the whole structure of the walk was failing. And I had to have this huge reassessment of what I saw as progress and what I saw as achievement. And so because I've been through that in the first walk, I know that I have to be much laxer in the second walk. So I just walk as far as I can each day. And sometimes that's 5 miles, if you're on a mountain, or if you're really tired that day, or if something happened, you get invited into someone's house for coffee, and then it's lunch, and then da da da. And that has happened. All 3 of those things have happened. And sometimes I walk 18, 20 miles a day, and I do not beat myself up about either of those distances, and I do my best not to pressure myself about those things.
How did you get to the start line?
I hitchhiked from not quite from mid Wales. I took some trains to visit a friend in Norwich. Then I took a ferry to the Hook of Holland, and from Hook of Holland I hitchhiked to Kiev.
I bet that's like a story in itself. How long did it take you to hitchhike?
From Hook of Holland, I'm going to say 3 days. And it was wonderful. It was so wonderful. I met my first Ukrainian man called Igor, and I crossed Germany overnight in a van with this very intense Polish man who was doing his usual kind of Polish thing of just working really hard and not stopping and being incredibly tough and blah, blah, blah. And then I got to South Poland, and this guy called Igor picked me up in this real beat up old, I don't know if it was a VW, I think it might have been, but this old VW van that he was driving at about, kind of chugging along at about 40 miles an hour. And then we spent about 20 hours together chugging away to the center of Ukraine. And it was fantastic. It was such an adventure. And another really good thing, so the next guy who picked me up ended up taking me right into the center of Kiev, and he gave me this tour. He was driving this little Jeep, and he gave me a tour around the center of the city, and he was explaining all these different things, because he'd grown up in Kiev, but then had emigrated to America. He was telling me all these things about the president and the histories of the different kind of financial corruptions, and you had that whole Ukrainian Spring thing, like the revolutions, and it was incredible. It was wonderful, and of course you're just so exhilarated by this experience, and it was a brilliant way to arrive in Ukraine. And I'm quite vehement about not flying. I think it's really important not to fly, especially over land. So I would, although I never say never, but I do not ever intend to fly across Europe, because ecologically I don't think we should be doing that. So that was one reason to hitchhike. And the other reason is that I quite like adventures that start from your door. So I stepped out of I can't remember where I was on that final morning. Okay, I didn't have a door of my own, but I had a hometown, let's say. And I left my hometown and the adventure started that day. And I'm going to walk back to my hometown. And I just really and that's what I did during the last journey as well. You know, started from my door or started from my hometown. And I really like that style. It seems strange to me to fly to some exotic part of the world and spend 3 months there and then fly home. That doesn't feel right to me. I don't ever want that to be my style.
What's it like on the road? Do you have, a daily routine? What's going on? Like, how is it out there?
I mean, I try and stick to a weekly kind of routine. So I'll usually walk 6 days and then have a day off. I've just started. I don't know if I'm very strict about a routine. I mean, I must have. I must have something. I can't really think.
You might not.
I don't. I don't kind of go right. You must. I get going as early as possible, which is mostly around 8 a.m. You know, in that kind of sense, like I'll stop for lunch and my evening stopping times are getting longer and longer, which is wonderful. Because during the winter, you have to virtually stop at like 3:30 just to have that half hour of. I like to eat in the daylight, so I wouldn't kind of carry on walking past darkness. So at 3:30 is just ridiculously early time. There I would be, tucked up in my tent by 4 p.m. and darkness by 4:30, 4:15. It's crazy.
Could you describe the route? So, what is your plan for walking Europe? So, hitchhiking to Kiev, and then
Hitch to Kiev. So I knew that I wanted to visit Bulgaria, but in that sense of returning to somewhere I'd where I was when I got cancer. Even though I didn't go back to the actual village, that was a point that I wanted to visit. And I also wanted to include the Camino to Santiago in my route, because I spent about a year in Spain, mostly in Galicia and Asturias, and I actually worked in a pilgrim hostel. And that really interested me. So I kind of had these 2 points. Those are the 2 points between the start and the end date. So what it means is that I actually kind of curved down through the Carpathians into Romania and down into Bulgaria to cross the Danube at Rusa. So right over in the eastern side. And then I came across through Bulgaria into Serbia, dropped down into Montenegro, and then up into Bosnia. And then I'm looking at kind of a curve of Croatia, Slovenia, and across the top of Italy, which I've just completed, and then across south of France into Spain, across to Finisterre, back across the top of Spain, and up through France to Britain. That's kind of the general shape of the route. And I didn't plan too far ahead for the actual specifics. So sometimes I can follow a route. So across from Montenegro up to Croatia, the top of Croatia, almost actually Slovenia, I followed a route called the Via Dinarica, the Green Trail. So there's a couple of variants of it. So that was really interesting because I knew my route ahead for, I had about a month, 2 months on that route. But sometimes I'll plan day by day. And it's getting easier now I'm into Western Europe because there are more footpaths, there are more trails, there's more information, GPS, tracks available online, stuff like that. But when I was in Ukraine, I had paper maps, which were 1 in 200,000 scale, and I had a compass, and that was all I had. And I navigated across Ukraine like that, and it was fabulous, so interesting. So interesting. Psychologically, it was so interesting not to have this grand overview of all the digital information that we have. And then, fortunately, most of it was flat. So I had more detailed maps for the mountains when it came time to cross the Carpathians. But I had this map that was just this completely almost unhelpful scale. But because it was flat, I could just set my compass and take these dirt tracks between small villages and just kind of follow my nose a little bit, which was a really great way to travel.
Recently, there's been sort of, a lot of uncertainty. There's been a lot of change, especially with, coronavirus hitting Europe. How has that impacted on you and your journey?
So I entered Italy on around the 14th, 15th of December, sorry. So as I've been walking across Italy, this coronavirus has been spreading all over the world and kind of, as you know, we all know now, getting a major foothold in Italy first. And for a while, I was able to ignore it and just keep on walking and check that I hadn't been in any of the affected areas recently. As it kind of got more serious, a few towns were getting locked down, and I would check, what's happened. No, I'm fine. And I felt reassured about carrying on because I was mostly in the forests and the mountains, and I was going down to a town about every 3 or 4 days and buying food. But as it was ramping up, suddenly things happened very quickly, and I basically woke up in the forest and Italy was on full lockdown, which was a very strange feeling indeed. So I basically at that point walked into France, with minimal contact with people and towns and civilization whatsoever. And then arrived in France, and within 48 hours, I thought I could just, it's going to sound strange now to people listening to this, who knows how much time in the future. I thought I could just carry on, and I thought that maybe I should get somewhere just for a week until this blows over. And that seems laughable now, even a week later. And in a couple of months, that is going to seem incredible, because we all felt like that, I think. None of us have really, the scale of it has become apparent to us. Not many ordinary people have been able to predict this. So yeah, France went into full lockdown. And at that point, I went, okay, I think I need, just before that happened, I kind of went, right, I think I need somewhere to stay. So I asked my friends for help, and somebody's sister has a holiday home here in South France, and I'm able to stay in it for the duration. And that feels right, because I didn't want to just escape for home, because I don't have a home. So I'd have to get back to the UK and do the same that I've done here, which is ask people for help. But also it feels like breaking the journey. When I'm here in France, I'm still in the journey, and I'm still immersed in it, in the strangeness, in the foreignness. Going home would partly seem like giving up, and just partly be, I'd hate it. I'd really hate to do that. So I feel incredibly lucky right now. I have the challenges of isolation and loneliness to cope with, as many people are in this time. And I think we're all kind of adjusting to this new normal. And the internet is this fabulous tool for helping us with that. It's awful because everyone's sharing their fear and misinformation and badly sourced rumours. But we also have these huge positives that are coming out of it, where people are communicating and helping and caring about each other. from a distance.
How are you coping financially? Have you got enough money?
I do. I have my savings, and I also have a Patreon. So I do have a small income. Actually, right now in this moment, for the first time since September 2018, my income exceeds my outgoings. So I'm using that to be able to support other people. I'm giving a bit of money to charity, and I'm helping a family member. So it feels really important to me because I live on the generosity of others. It feels really important to me to give as well. Something to do with flow. I am finding, because during this journey and during this whole time in my life, for years now, I feel like the more I open myself to chance, the more I receive. And I've started to realize that as well as receiving, I also need to give. And because I've always kind of, as part of that uncertainty of self, I've always felt like I haven't had enough. And I have always been struggling. I haven't earned enough to pay tax for many years. I'm not, I'm not well off. I'm not rich. I'm not even well off. So there's this kind of struggle mindset, and it's a fear that comes with that, with not having enough. And when I was growing up, we didn't, there were times times were tough sometimes. So for me, it's this huge change to have the mindset of having enough and having enough to give. And that's a really big deal for me to learn. So all I can say is, for now, I have enough, and that's enough.
Yeah. How do you think you're going to occupy your time? Like, do you think you'd start? I'm hoping that there's going to be a book about One Woman Walks Europe. Is that something that you'd like to do?
That's the idea. It's really interesting to make this journey with a book in mind this time, whereas last time the idea just kind of grew as the journey went along. So I've set myself a checklist of constructive tasks. Writing is one of them, and then there's other things like exercise or chores or whatever. Because I think, like many other people, I look at my phone too much, and that is not good for me. So yes, someone gave me the idea last night of writing to photos. So rather than, I don't really feel like I could start writing the book right now, because I feel like I'm still in the middle of the journey, and I can't start going back to Ukraine and assessing my experiences of Ukraine and summarizing. I don't feel like I can summarize while I'm still in the middle of the journey. So I'm trying to think about how can I do this? Can I maybe write some of the bigger themes of the book? Someone gave me the idea of writing about photographs. So just, pick a photograph at random and write about it. So there are various kind of tasks. I've got a few letters that I can write. There are various tasks that I'm setting myself at the moment, with the idea of making use of time, but also about keeping a healthy mind and body, because I think that's really important at the moment, to be conscious about it,
Do you have a laptop with you, or do you do everything on your phone?
Everything's on my phone.
Got you. Okay.
But I do have a little wireless keyboard, which really helps for writing. That's a massive help.
And Ursula, how can people follow along with your journey? How can they find out more about you? How can they support you?
So I'm mostly under the name One Woman Walks, apart from Twitter, where I'm Woman Walks Wales, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And my website is onewomanwalks.com. I've managed to get the name.
And I'd love you to leave our listeners with final words of advice, final words of wisdom, anything that you would like to share, anything that you've learned over the past sort of 10 years. And I know that's a big question.
Quick, distill. I would say that whatever you are is enough, and whatever you can do is enough. And don't do comparisons, and don't beat yourself up, and don't think about should. Just be yourself.
Ursula, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your walk across Europe. It's absolutely inspiring to have you on, and I can't wait to keep updated with your journey. I know it will start again soon. Things will go back to normal. You will be able to complete your walk and get back home to Wales.
Yeah, eventually I will, and that's okay. I feel fine. I feel fine about this pause. We just all have to get on with it, don't we?
Absolutely, we do.
Think about what, we can't think about what we're losing or what things might have been. More than anything at all, we just have to get on with what it is.
Hey Tribe, I hope you enjoyed the episode with Ursula. Now, everything that we have talked about is available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com, so please do go and check it out. If you're brand new to the podcast, thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate your support. Just want to give you a couple of top podcast recommendations, a couple of episodes that I think you'd really enjoy, especially if you are into walking. We have interviewed a lot of hikers and through hikers and walkers throughout the past couple of years. So this is just a few suggestions of women that we've spoken to recently. So you can go and take a listen to Gina Johansson, who shared more about walking 3,000 kilometers the length of Norway. We've also spoken with Mel Vogel, and Mel is currently through hiking Canada's Great Trail, 24,000 kilometers from the Atlantic coast. She's heading over to the Arctic Ocean and then back down to the Pacific Ocean. We've also spoken with Sonia Richmond, who's a 42-year-old Canadian who is also currently hiking across Canada on the Great Trail, 24,000 kilometers. Sonia's doing that with her husband, and they're sort of a couple of years behind Mel, but both women doing this amazing challenge, but in very sort of different ways and different purposes. So absolutely fascinating episodes to listen to. I've shared more about my own through hiking the Appalachian Trail in 100 days. You can take a listen to Carmen Rendell as well, who we spoke to at the very beginning of 2020, who shares more about walking the entire coast of the British Isles. And her goal is to raise the profile for walking therapy. Just going back to 2018 episodes, you can take a listen to Janie McGill, who shares more about her 630-mile trek of the Southwest Coastal Path, where she was planting sunflower seeds to honour the 616 soldiers severely wounded as a result of the war in Afghanistan. Tara Rome shares more about being the first woman to walk 17,000 kilometres solo and unsupported around Australia. Hannah Engelkamp shares more about walking the 1,000-mile circumference of Wales with Chico, the donkey. Amazing. Lindsay Cole came on and shared more about walking the length of the rabbit-proof fence in Australia. And we've also spoken with Katie Jane Lepiniere, who shares more about walking unsupported the entire length of the Great Wall of China, which she did in 2007, and doing the longest crossing of the southern Patagonia ice cap by a woman. So we have lots of episodes for you to listen to. There's a couple of hundred episodes in the back catalogue. So the Tough Girl podcast was started on the 4th of August, 2015. We're coming into our 5th year, which I'm obviously super, super excited about. And to help celebrate the 5th year anniversary of the Tough Girl podcast, I'm going to be releasing 5 episodes on the 4th of August. So make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss out on any of this content. There's also bonus episodes which come out on a Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time. These are sort of quite ad hoc, but I have managed to get some real consistency over the past couple of months. So going forward, you should be getting about 2 episodes every single week, which is, hopefully will keep you entertained and motivated and inspired. If you have been entertained, motivated and inspired, and you would like to pay it forward to encourage other women to get fit and active and to travel and explore, then please do consider signing up as a patron. It makes such a massive difference having financial support every single month. Please do go and visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. And there are, different levels that you can sign up to, depending on what you can afford. If you can afford $2 a month, that would be incredible. If you can afford $10 a month, that would be incredible. If you can afford $5 a month, that would be amazing. Whatever you can afford. And if you can't afford to support at the moment, I get it. I totally understand. But what I would love for you to do is just to tell one person about the Tough Girl Podcast. Tell a friend, tell a work colleague about the Tough Girl Podcast. Share an episode which you think would inspire them. If they've got a passion for running or rowing or triathlon or flying or sailing, then there will be a Tough Girl Podcast episode to motivate and inspire them. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just have an awesome day. Give it your all. Give it 110%. Get after it. Live your dreams. Be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. Take care. Lots of love. And I'll be back with you next Tuesday. Bye.